Hello? Good morning! I'm already a disaster, oh my god. If things in videos start appearing slightly out of order, it is because there's a massive rainstorm where I am at for the next 2 weeks, so I can't work on a lot of stuff outside, which I need to finish up this project. Instead, we're gonna do our best to make it work and we're gonna do our best to make it work. So today we're gonna focus on the bodice pattern. This is gonna be a fun one. I think this is kind of gonna be my test run for the other bodice pattern for the wedding dress, which is coming later this year. I need to remember to account for all of the skirt layers in this because of the way that you do the skirt. It adds quite a bit of bulk to your waist. So I gotta remember that, and I gotta add that to the pattern, and I gotta find the patterns and find paper that's not wet because, like I said, it is raining a lot outside and a lot of my paper is kind of under this car right here. Let's just jump into it, yeah? Like many other patterning projects, if you have been here before, I am just using my princess seam base pattern. If you have a princess seam pattern, this is very easy to do, to just trace it and change it just slightly, which is what I'm doing here. I've traced it down to the waist and the hip notch because I know that my front center point is probably going to be around the hip notch, and I for sure want to have my waist lines transferred across all of the patterns. I am lining up the side front piece so that I have the whole armhole represented here on this pattern because it does have a kind of over the shoulder strap thing that I'll have to draft into this center front pattern. So to actually draft this weird off shoulder over arm piece that we're adding, I'm just marking out how wide I want that, where it attaches to the armhole, and then I'm drawing a whole new neckline because I forgot that this was a thing, sadly. Like, it was such a good original neckline, but this one's just as good, I'm sure. And now I'm just gonna match up a basic sleeve pattern so that I can get the depth of this that I need, and I'm matching it up with the notch and then lining it up at the very bottom and measuring straight across with the grain of the sleeve. So I'm just using that center line to line it up across that so I know about how much material I'm going to need on that. While I'm drafting this, I also have the plan to put a piece of elastic in the off shoulder piece so that even if I add a little bit too much material, it'll still fit right and it won't be like falling down or weighed down. And I also know it won't be too tight because I'm adding an extra inch of material to my front and back pieces to gather along that elastic. So that was that second line that I added there, was that extra inch for give. I actually did something kind of silly on this pattern. I don't know why I did it. It's just how I did it. I actually went with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which I never ever do. I think I just knew I had limited fabric for this pattern. I don't know, really. It didn't really hinder me or help at all. It was just a thing that happened. In the reference photos, and I actually saw this costume in person, I know that there is 3 pieces to each side of the pattern. So I am just going to kind of split my side front piece and my side back pieces in half, make it like a nice cutesy little curve. And I'm just going to draw in a new line, and then I'm going to cut down the line to, I think I kept all of these to the waist notch for now. And then I'm just going to tape fabric onto the back and add my seam allowance afterwards so that it all matches up really nicely. One thing of note is I dropped the side seam armhole down a 1/2 inch so it wouldn't be so tight, and then I bumped the waist out by 1/2 inch on each side because I have to make room for all of the cartridge pleats. Now to get that really lovely point on the waist of this corset, I just taped all of the pieces back together with some painter's tape, so it's like super easy to take them back apart. And then I drew a singular line, and I wish I had drawn it on and then cut it out and then untaped it, but I didn't do that for some reason. It was fine in the end, but I did like take them apart and then cut them, which like I should have just cut them and then drawn the lines in, and then it all would have for sure matched, but I did it like this for some reason. Like, definitely just, like, at this point, cut it out. Like, don't take them apart. That was so silly. Also, when you're drafting a point like this, like a really dramatic point, you want to make sure that you fold along your seam lines and cut the seam allowance so that there isn't as much bulk in that point. You don't have to have a super sharp point like this. You want to fold it along the seams and cut away any excess. This also makes it easier to line it up and know exactly where your seam allowance is. So when you start sewing, you don't have to like kind of guess where you need to match it up, if that makes sense. This sleeve drapey thing is the point of pattern making where you are truly making it up as you are going along. I basically just took the measurement of my overarm things. Sorry, that's funny every time I say it. And I added, I think, like 2 inches to my already gathered number. And then I had this piece of paper, so I just drew a little cute little circle. And then it turned out great. And I didn't change a thing. That's a lie. I did change it in the end. I made the bottom rounder. And I also didn't have that much fabric, so it's actually shorter. Yeah, just fly by the seat of your pants sometimes. Like, truly. Also, I was doing this fitting, and I was like, yeah, you know, I'll probably, like, take this in a little bit, you know, like, so that those stick out. And then they just kind of started sticking out by themselves. So then I unpinned that. And I was also getting these really bad pull lines because of where the cartridge pleats were sitting. That isn't a problem anymore, but I think it's also just because I'm not tight lacing the final garment. And that this is like not a super stiff material, the muslin. So yeah, the only thing I really did alter was the neckline a little bit. I took it down in both the back and the front. Then I also added the point in the back. And yeah, that's the sleeve thing.
Editing me here, because obviously things have changed. But I actually saw Wuthering Heights in between doing the fitting and the like cutting. And watching that, I decided I needed to drop the waist a teeny tiny little bit and add a little bit of flare. So I did actually, on the side seam of the waist, add another 1/2 inch to the bottom waist of the pattern right here. And then I like shot it straight out so that it does just kind of have like a little bit more of a flare at the hem of the bodice. Okay, I just wanted to make that update. And I did change the back pattern to be pointed as well. Yeah, okay.
To actually sew this all together, there are 3 layers. So there's my organza layer, that's the dyed layer, and I know I was going to need a dark layer behind that. So I had this stretchy suiting material left over from a past project, and I was trying to use up fabrics that I already had for this. So that's why I'm using a lot of literal scrap cuts in this. But I basically cut out 3 of all of the pieces, one in this light blue lining, one in the dyed organza, and then one in that dark blue suiting material. And then I pinned the organza onto the suiting material so that I could run a stay stitch along the edges, which is basically just your longest stitch length run along the edges to keep these 2 pieces together really nicely while I'm sewing all of the pattern pieces together. I kind of was planning to do this with my serger, and then I actually didn't. And I also had to go back in and recut all of my notches, and that's what you see me doing here. And so that was a little annoying, and I kind of stopped doing that after these first 2 pattern pieces, I'm not gonna lie. Like, they're in the suiting material, they're just not in the organza, because I didn't want to compromise the organza by cutting little notches in. I do the inverted notches, because that's what I was always taught, and I actually find it easier to line up and to sew than the point-out triangle notches, unless it's a knit, then I do the point-out triangle notches. Because I'm usually serging it anyway, so I can just cut them off as I go, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm rambling a lot. I'm not gonna lie. But it's fine, we're getting the information in the end. To put the elastics in the arm holes, I guess we could just call it, I divided it in half, and then I put that half straight on that side seam? Shoulder seam, I guess? And then I just ran a straight stitch down in the ditch of that seam, and then lined up, I made notches on the original pattern for where this elastic was gonna go, and I lined up the edge of the elastic right there, and I ran another straight stitch down the elastic to secure it in place right there. After the elastic was secured in those 3 places, I stretched the elastic while I was pinning it, and then I put between 3 and 4 pins in each side of this elastic. So there was like 6 pins total in it to hold it stretched out. And then I ran 2 different zigzag stitches down the edges of the elastic to keep it nice. And you always want to do a zigzag stitch when you are working with stretches or elastic, because a straight stitch will pop and it will break. Your thread will break, but a zigzag stitch has give. I also tried to burn the organza and it just doesn't burn anymore, so I had to glue those lovely edges. And then I realized I actually didn't have to because there was ruffles on that edge, but that's fine. I also did not videotape any of the ruffles, but I did just hand sew gathers into all of the ruffles, and those were all custom dyed after the fact because I realized I couldn't use my leftover organza because it didn't look right, and then it needed to be tulle, and I had some leftover tulle, so I used that. Anyways, let's just say all of that is hand stitched on, and it is also done in a hand kind of zigzag over the elastic as well, where I was basically only catching the organza in those spots. Yeah, it was a whole thing, but we got it all done and now it looks so good, so thanks. Sorry if that was really rambly. Like, genuinely, if you have questions, just ask them in the comments. Whatever, I'm very happy to help people on their sewing journeys.
Evidently I wasn't ready, actually, to start filming, but isn't that just so like me? This is such an awkward height, okay. Other than a little bit of ironing and a little bit more gathering at the very top here, I'm calling this done. The bodice is done. I think it turned out really well. I might make a back middle panel to get rid of this gap, but I don't know for sure yet, you know. But I think it actually turned out so good. I did put elastic, you saw me put some elastic in here so that there's a little bit more give in that. It needs a little reset, everything needs a little iron, a little press, a little steam. Now that the bodice is done, we can finally finish the skirt. And then it's just accessories, and I'm so excited. I'm so glad that this is getting done now with like a month till con. So thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed. I think we all learned a little something on this one. And I definitely learned that I can still fly by the seat of my pants. So bye. Wait, did I do the thank you for being here, see you next time? Probably. If not, I just did it, so bye.